Alright, we are here to review comments and do some basic troubleshooting. This is One-Eye Jack and the Shells, Death to the Ball. It's dead to me. Alright, so to your comments. If you leave comments in any of my videos, I get to them. And one of my objectives here with the IPS morning deprogram is to go through the comments left behind on the Discord servers, but also on the YouTube channel. So no comments left behind. We'll just start with 6 hours ago. The Frugal Snowbird. Time to go to Rumble. Yes, we have some problems with YouTube. Somebody flagged my video during a live stream, shut us down under false pretenses. I got my appeal, so I'm not necessarily bothered by it because it wasn't a strike, but it shows that we do have opposition. There are people who will sit there and abuse their flagging system to shut down our live streams, as pathetic as that sounds. Okay, let's see. Paradox Moronics says, Tim talks about experiencing Truman Show-like tactics in his daily life, which prompted me to comment in the live chat about how this happens to me as well. Right after I posted my comment, the stream was suddenly shut down or cut off. I'd like to believe it was a coincidence, but my intuition tells me otherwise. Thank you, IPS, for your continued efforts to deprogram those of us who are paying attention. Yeah, that was a funny coincidence. And I always say make note of what's happening at the moment of throttling, which is what they call it. So there's only one channel open right now. Joined by Portal Complex, Matt X, McDirtyWork, 91 Okie, thank you for joining. Let's just continue through these comments. And about that, I was talking about this. I mean, I used to use the word matrixy to explain it, but I know these are just coincidences. But walking through the store, somebody stands in your way. You go to the register, the credit card machine screws with you. You go to your car and somebody happens to park their shopping cart in front of the door, like rudely. And, you know, I've had these instances happen, or I'm driving down the street and a car pulls out in front of me. A Tesla Roadster refuses to go at a stop sign, so I have to back up and do a 180 and leave. And all these things happening in a short span of time make it seem like more than a coincidence. But sometimes improbable things happen all at once. Sure. There's no way the universe is stalking me. But it does say something, though, about pattern recognition and perhaps maybe suggestibility and paranoia. Awareness. We're designed to be aware of our environments and to locate possibly hidden threats. But there's a few other factors you plug into it which kind of make it seem like it is indeed somehow personal. Make of that what you will. Murphy's Law. If anything can go wrong, it will. Obviously, that's just people with a certain bias. And everything that goes wrong, they're going to label like that. But they may not notice how many things are going right. So I do happen to think there is something like luck. But I don't think it's bad luck or good luck. I think it's just neutral. And maybe it's just a word for describing something that science hasn't yet fully come to recognize. Or it could be, again, just maybe my simian brain, but I think there may be some kind of recognition of our influence on things, and people will describe it as bad luck or good luck if they externalize it. Like, this isn't caused by me, this is coming from an outside force. Anyway, it's a fascinating topic, and it is a strange coincidence that we were shut down at that moment. Dr. Base Reverse Psychologist says, weird all the King references with Liver King and the No Kings group. And people saying Trump is Elvis, who was the king. Yeah, that's something I hadn't thought about. I was looking at this Liver King character, and he was ridiculed by Joe Rogan. He threatened to kill Joe Rogan. He's on his way to fight Joe Rogan, indirectly threatened the family. I mean, if you really listen to everything that he said in his psychosis, I think you could suggest that there's reason for Joe Rogan to be afraid. The guy was posing with a wolf's head on his head, holding a gold-plated automatic rifle, whatever you call those things, like the AR that Adam Lanza had. And I'm like, okay, this is some kind of a setup for something. And that could be it. You know, if you go back to Alex Jones and the theory that he was Bill Hicks. Okay, well, supposedly Bill Hicks wrote a script for a Rush Limbaugh-like character who at the end of his career is killed by one of his own fans. Some kind of bizarre incident. All right, let's see what else is rolled up in here. I haven't heavily promoted this. I just threw out a quick notice. I wanted to mainly test, like, how's the audio? Is it choppy? Because I went to ChatGPT and I asked for all the best recommendations for optimizing the settings. And so far, it seems good. And phones are open if you want to test that. I just want to test everything before we commit. All right, continuing here, joined by Josh Lebsack, Penguinati Auto Hoaxer. 91 Oki says, I've seen people angry at simple driving basic rules. Hello Raft says, let's go. And Paradox Moronics, yeah, we were addressing one of your comments here. Okay, continue. Now, so the Liver King story, it's still ongoing. And from what I saw, he's got an ankle bracelet, and he's still in Austin, and he's continuing to make these bizarre threats. I don't think it looks like scripted theater. I don't think it looks like Cywar. But I don't know. Like Penguinati says, Liver King is almost an anagram of Elvis King. It's almost in there. Evil King, kind of. But I don't know. I mean, I think that he's either a really good actor, which is possible. I mean, how is this different from World Wrestling Entertainment? But he's acting genuinely, like, unsettling, but that could be the role. Same could be said for Laura Loomer. And Laura Loomer has been really a punching bag for a lot of these woke right types. And right now, what's his name? Milo Yiannopoulos is unloading, like, basically a decade of blackmail material against Laura Loomer, just dumping it on X. It's getting pretty ugly, but it's consistent with what we were expecting. Where you have this conspiracy theorist, mentally unstable, too close to the president. And right now, I don't know, we'll see, but it's madness. Portal says Rush Limbaugh is Jim Morrison. There's some convincing arguments that can be made from select photos. And Limbaugh singing This Is the End, kind of offhandedly one day. And then he sang once at some Rush for Excellence tour, which I thought was very Morrison-esque. He retired from EIB after 33 years, and then he conveniently died before he had to really deal with the fallout from January 6th. I thought that timing, that exit was kind of well-timed. Penguinati says, God is letting Satan sabotage you so you'll hit rock-bottom desperation and pray to him, which will bizarrely be met with surprisingly miraculous positive success. If that's the game, then God is some kind of a sadist. Like, I'm not going to help you until you cry uncle, until you just totally give up. Like, okay, that's possible. That's not inconsistent with his character from what I've heard and read. Rock bottom. But I think I've already hit, as far as like rock bottom, you're talking about the black pill. You've assessed it and you've come to radically accept, like as a stoic, the worst that life will ever throw at you. And once you accept that, nothing is really bad by comparison. And you can stop clinging to illusions that maybe prevent you from moving past certain obstacles. Like, yeah, I understand. Sometimes you need to, but I don't think terrible OBS settings and internet throttling constitutes like a real obstacle. I look at these as temporary. These are just glitches, and everybody has to deal with it. It's just the cost of doing business. And the stalkers, when it comes to stalkers online, that's cost of doing business. And I've thought about this as well. I recognize that there's a lot of people out there who are unhinged, and you just have to be a little proactive about it. I wrote a book, an ebook and a course called, it was a counter-stalking guide. And I think the title was Unmasking the Trolls. It was a doxing guide. And I showed people how to dox trolls and eventually I pulled it offline because somebody tried to use it as evidence against me. Infinite Plane Radio. Give it just 1 second here. I think that, hey, thank you for calling.
Good evening, IP.
Hey, what's up? Are you calling from the moon? Just give it a second. Give it a second. Okay, there we go. You were very choppy.
Good evening, IPS. This is Portal Complex calling you from Canada. How are you doing?
Oh, calling from Canada. Yeah, pretty good. You're a little choppy. Where are you? Are you at some kind of outdoor event?
Currently on Highway 401, heading back to town. Was working the power lines, just trying to keep the lights on for everybody here.
Oh,
I just wanted to test out the phones first and foremost.
well, thank you. They sound fine.
You can ask in the chat if that was.
Yeah, it's crazy. The streaming has degraded over the last few weeks, and I barely noticed it, and then it got really bad. So I took today to ask ChatGPT and Perplexity to find the best possible settings, and I think I've solved it.
Right, yeah, with, I don't know the exact program you use for streaming the shows and what hardware or software you're using. YouTube, I find even when I upload some of our music to YouTube, it sheds off some of that high quality. But this is ridiculous. Like, it's never really been this bad. We're all getting ripped off by buying data. And, the thought that they're already running on 8G and 9G and we're still stuck on 5 is comical, to say the least. But
now how do the people...
Have you ever thought of tapping in?
Well, I was going to say, how do the people who are scared of 5G handle living with 9G? I didn't know there was a 9G yet.
Yeah, the covert, the secret government always had the military channels to say that, they're way ahead of the game and this and that. I think 5G is incredible, man. It's super fast internet. I'm not afraid of it. It's great. Now, I do know the difference between a kilowatt and a megawatt. That's fine. You can draw that shit on paper. One hits you like a thunderbolt, and the other one will hit you like a wave from the ocean. I got this neighbor. His name is Chuck Quick on the sideline. He worked in sales, and he was one of the first to have early day Motorola cell phones, and he was on that thing like, I don't know, 6-7 hours a day back in the late 80s or mid 80s when they started to pop out. Chuck's like 92 and he's got no tumors. He's good to go. So I don't know, man. I think 5G is great. I'm waiting for 6, 7, 8, 9. They sell you on convenience, so we're just waiting in line to pay more money. And, no one realizes that less is more, but...
Well, I'm very optimistic. Some in the comments mentioned I'm a forever optimist. And I'm also very optimistic about AI. People are very critical and wary of everything that's new. But everything that I've found I've used it for so far has just been like a permanent change, a permanent improvement. And that's why I went to AI today to find the best settings. I'm just getting better information these days. And so I just think that things will gradually improve, even if, of course, we have to pay a little bit extra in premium, like I'm paying, but it's worth it. Well, it should be, because this mission is very important. How long have you been in the IPS think tank?
I've been around, I would have to say, December 2016. I got a call from a musician friend of mine. His name is DJ Alex from Athens, Greece, and he brought me on. And at that time, this was the time you probably remember when NASA chat raids were all the buzz. you actually had a separate channel, just like doing mixtapes. So you were like taking in music from other penguins per se, and yeah, shit wasn't that ballistic at that time. Like we were able to tear down and research certain topics of the past, monumental topics, and how infiltration of current topics we're like bombarded. It's like switching your Kalashnikov to auto. You can't even research without getting bombarded with another story or say another math quiz. But
Well,
yeah,
I've changed.
2000.
Okay, 2016. Okay, so when the channel started about or okay, just wondering.
December, so it'd be late. It was December. Yeah.
Because this think tank has been around for a long time,
December.
and it's been very consistent. And I'm trying to kind of bring back everybody that was part of it in the past, and so I have the old channel open back up. But things have very much evolved in a lot of ways. And anyway, Chief Crow recently contacted me, and invited me. Well, he was in contact with somebody who organized an event called Flatlanta, which is in October. So I will be there, and Chief Crow will be performing live.
Right on. That kid's a genius, man. I haven't seen one of his live sessions lately. I do rewatch old ones. So if you're listening, Chief, get up on that. Put the park on. Get in that studio, man. Yeah, man. I listen to like musicians that are like one man bands, but this guy takes the cake for sure.
Well, at Flatlanta, I plan to introduce the PSYOP trading cards. I'll obviously be there to live stream, and I'll have a booth. And my objective is really the PSYOP trading cards more than anything. I think these cards are really a key to infiltrating Trutherville with something that they have somehow missed this entire time, which is the truth about media fakery and how deep the rabbit hole really does go. Because I think they've fallen short. And I see the PSYOP trading cards as sort of an outreach. Like Jehovah's Witnesses use those little pamphlets. I think PSYOP trading cards could be a paradigm shifter. But that's in October, yes. It's called Flatlanta. It's in Atlanta.
A little far for me. Love to be there, but again, on the trading cards, we spoke of this years back. And that trading card game that had come out in the early 90s, that so-called predict many events that have happened.
Yes, the Illuminati trading cards. Yes, by Stephen Jackson, Illuminati trading cards.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what we're not copying it because we're taking this from a different perspective, but we're covering a lot of the same subjects. And I think we have an overlapping audience, collector base. And so far, sales have been good. Autohoax.com. They're all listed.
Right. Yeah, I'll jump on tonight and see if I can get one ordered or tomorrow. I'm still on the highway here. I got to drive and I got to go sleep at a stop here. But I most definitely order my own as well. And what I wanted to say was, bringing back the original members from back in the day, would you entertain making personal penguin cards in a sense that, let's say, I'll give you an example, like someone like Osher that's been around for a while and has a character and has her stats on the back. For example, it could be like she's been around for this long, she's done this, that, little small write-up, and then some of her powers, and then we could have like an actual like not like Pokemon, but kind of like a cool little entertaining game on the side.
Yeah, I could see that working.
That was just an idea we had a few years ago.
Sure. We did something similar with the South Pole, where we took various of our monikers and put them into these South Pole characters that weren't in the cartoon, but they were in the artwork and the outro and the intro. And yeah, actually, that could be done quite readily, um, for sure, definitely. And I'll be producing 12 new cards every month. So by the time October rolls around, we'll have dozens. But yeah, thanks for keeping in touch. And if you haven't been
Oh,
to the new
wow.
Discord, definitely go to the Discord
Yeah.
server.
Yeah. How can I grab a link? For some reason, I try getting in. I'm not in it. I don't know. Did something happen with the old one?
Yeah, I had to terminate. I had to fumigate two different Discord servers, but the new one is
Oh, okay,
permanent.
gotcha.
The new one, if you just go to, I guess the best way is on the newsletter. I'll send out a link. I'll do that. I'll make sure I get you the most recent link.
Yeah.
So ips.monster, if you sign up for the newsletter,
You can go to.
you'll get it.
Okay. Right on. Sounds good. Just one more thing. Anyone who's listening right now, you might be new, you might be old. Get up on. I know you don't have Patreon going right now. Get up, support IPS. Keep doing your thing, and thanks a lot. Okay.
Thank you.
Stay tuned.
Thank you for the call, and have a good one. We'll talk soon. Everyone, that's Portal Complex. And yeah, as far as supporting the channel, being a part of the think tank is the main part, because this is really crowdsourced intel, information, perspectives, insights. But these trading cards, I went with this for a very particular reason, because they have, I think, a great potential to perhaps sell quite well. And the tabloid was meant to do this, but it's a little more expensive to get the tabloids moving. So it's still happening. But right now I kind of shifted into the cards, which kind of overlap anyway. So I can build out the sales channels, YouTube, Amazon. So everything's moving according to plan. But the cards, I think, have the greatest, mainstream appeal. And I'm basing this off of responses that I've already received. So if you haven't received your cards, you're probably going to get them if you ordered them already. Likely tomorrow. I'm trying to do my shipping on the daily. Okay, let's go back to the comments. Etheric Bliss says false reporting. That's about beyond. It's about how I've lost every one of my pages. Not to mention comments that have vanished on all platforms. I don't know why these petty power trippers are insistent on leaning on deceit. How do these clowns not realize that life itself is so much easier and simpler without that kind of energy? Sad and pathetic. Congrats on the cards, by the way. Solid. Did the stream end just like that? Wow. Are you using your phone as a hotspot? That could be the issue. That's not the issue. Anyway, he says it's YouTube's bad policy lends itself out for abuse. Absolutely, I agree, Etheric Bliss. YouTube tends to, I think, favor the person with the hurt feelings over the content creator. So if you can allege that your feelings are hurt, you now have a claim against this person's content, and they check it after the fact. But what was surprising in this instance is they terminated us during a live stream, mid-sentence, based on somebody reporting that I showed a video of somebody brandishing a firearm, which I did not. So the power of the lie needs to be emphasized here. Lies are powerful in this world. I call it the lie world order for a reason. I think that lying is a basic form of magic, witchcraft. In fact, one of Aleister Crowley's more famous books is called The Book of Lies. And I want to go reread it now that I have a better understanding of what he meant when he talked about words and the power of words and its connection to creation, and therefore lies having the power to bend or alter. Critterfest says, people are mad I listen to the show, it's making me smarter, and that intimidates them. Well, they probably think it's making you extreme or dangerous, or perhaps it's almost like religious people. They don't like the atheist. They don't like the non-believer. And in darker times and in certain places, they treat the non-believers pretty badly. But really, I'm not telling you what to think or what to believe. I'm saying don't believe without good info, and rather instead become an informed disbeliever so you can explain why you don't believe something. And if you weigh these things side by side, you'll find that the informed non-believer knows more about the news that the low info believers know. And that's kind of sad. It's like, you believe this crap because you saw a headline. I don't believe it because I read 50 articles about it from different perspectives and I know it's crap. So you can't say that the low information believer has a higher moral high ground or intellectual high ground. So if they're mad, it's because you're insulting their belief system, and they're believers. And there's a distinction between a believer and a knower. I used to call them MSM fundamentalists because they do have a religious framework, but it's not their fault. They were programmed. Ashy Dog says YouTube changes constantly, no official rules. Yeah, they're very arbitrary. I mean, I've sued YouTube with mixed success, but it's a work in progress. The last one, I mean, I have a pretty straight shot at them because of admitted fraud, and I have all the evidence, but it's been very difficult to locate this third party, and that's kind of on me, but it's going to happen. And the latest hackings by this person hacked my Kickstarter, I think the Gravatar, which is WordPress, as well as an attempt on Patreon and a couple of others. The last hackings were back in 2023, so that kind of resets the clock for the statute of limitations. So one of our channel's bigger enemies, who is responsible for shutting us down more than 100 times on YouTube, he will pay for that. That is coming. But he had exploited a loophole where you could claim copyrights over a video that you don't own. And by the time YouTube checks it and puts your video back up, the damage has been done. And for me, the damage was you're demonetized for this many days. And after enduring this for about a year, I sued YouTube for the loophole that allowed this anonymous third party to continually shut down my channels. And as a result, they pulled his channel and they reinstated mine, and they updated their policy, which made it so now if you get a strike, you're not demonetized. You're just given a 2-week warning. So they didn't used to have that warning. They fixed it because these loopholes are exploitable. And I know because I've exploited them myself, usually in retaliation. So somebody knows that if you flag a video and you claim this and you're willing to lie, you can get it shut down. Weak, very weak. Why not create a video where you counter everything I say, debate me, or something? But it's so much easier, I think, to just burn something down than to make something that competes with it. And that's the mentality we are dealing with. Somebody that will break the rules to shut you down midstream is somebody who would burn your business. And you have to approach them as really what they are. And the same set of considerations don't apply to them. And that's why I think I've been so terrible to certain people, like specifically my stalker, because he's gone outside of fair play. So I have too, which is why he's still in hiding. And how pathetic is that? Imagine having millions of dollars, you don't have to work, you're connected socially to a lot of very popular, influential figures, you're politically connected, you're part of the White House press corps, but you can't come out and talk as yourself in the real world because you've been so terrible and you've been doxxed. So, yes, I have that person under my boot, and he stays there. And it's pathetic because if I had that kind of money, I wouldn't let someone suppress my entire existence. But anyway, it's a victory in progress, and eventually we will have this person in court. In fact, I reported him to the FBI a few months ago. So if you don't know the backstory, it goes back to a stalker that was stalking us in 2017. Then he got a job at the White House and he kind of left us alone. But the more recent thing, he was the hacker who looked into Hunter Biden's laptop and published it online under a company called Marco Polo 501c3. And his business partner, who also worked at the White House, Garrett Ziegler, were being sued by Hunter Biden. Now, as a result of this lawsuit against Hunter Biden, they ended up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal defense. And to gain public support and get donations to pay for that, they wanted to make it look like they were being persecuted by the government. So what did they do? They claimed that somebody working for Biden killed a cat, put it on Garrett Ziegler's mother's porch with a threatening letter. And they posted a picture of a dead cat and a threatening letter and said, give us some donations because the deep state is after us. Now, keep in mind, this White House guy, press corps guy, is a big QAnon person. So the Q people thought the Hunter Biden laptop was going to expose the deep state. They had all kinds of ideas about what it contained. And they gave them a lot of money. Well, I called, this is in Altamont, Illinois. I called the chief of police and I made some other calls and I just tried to find out, did anybody report a dead cat or a death threat at this address in this area at this time? And they got back to me and nothing turned up. So this left me wondering, did they fake a story to get money? Did they kill a cat and fake a story to get money? Or did they fake a dead cat to create a fake story to raise money? Either way, the donors need to know that money was raised under false pretenses. So I filed a report with the FBI. I let PETA know. And my thing is, this cat doe needs to be exhumed. There needs to be a necropsy, and we need to find out who or what or how, how did it die? So that's a scandal, a dead cat killed by somebody who works in the White House, connected to Garrett Ziegler. One of them killed the cat, but I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I've already, again, made my reports with the FBI, but let's move on. All right, let's see here. Ashy Dog says, I got an alt with 14K subs in 1 year by clipping news shorts, unmonetized, but holding it for the future. YouTube controls a lot of media. Yeah, it's practically, I would almost describe it as some kind of antitrust issue because they do monopolize a great deal of the attention economy. However, what we're doing isn't, and this is just the IPS think tank, we've created this third branch of media. You've got the mainstream, alternative, but now we have a perspective that isn't somewhere in the middle, but it's completely outside of their box that doesn't include in our assessment any of the propaganda lies. So we subtract quite a bit. And so we're not trying to compete for space or air. We don't want to breathe their air. We don't need it. We don't need approval on any of their platforms. What we're creating here is this parallel media economy, which is completely separate. And it'll be a more stable base for launching our criticisms unrelentingly. So my objective isn't to, gain traction and go viral on YouTube or gain acceptance by a mass audience here, but rather to only find those who've already figured out the significance of media fakery and its role in worldview shaping worldwide and what the implications really are. And there are enough people who figured it out without falling into the trap of Trutherville. They're not drinking the Kool-Aid at Alex Jonestown. The main thing that trips people up seems to be the political horseshoe. If they're still caught up in politics, look, Donald Trump faked an assassination attempt. He was an insider in the January 6th PSYOP where nobody died, and he's fully aware of this, but he plays into it. So we have to remember that a lot of people are still in the Truman Show because they haven't figured out where the show ends and reality begins. Ashy Dog says, I like the multi-channel, can't be censored completely. Well, what I have are redundancies built into this. So for example, and this will just be moving forward, especially when I get the 24/7 back on, we will be on all the platforms, but then I will have the segments auto upload, as in they export to Odyssey, they export to Spotify, and therefore to all the different podcast platforms. So we're pretty much past the point of being censored. I'm not even worried about that. The main thing now is packaging and, for lack of a better term, marketing the ideas properly. And my next step here, because we've already figured out what so-called predictive programming is and what it's not, which is a more important discussion. What it isn't, the claims we're not making, because it has not been accurately represented until us. But the next step is defining in very down-to-earth, easy-to-understand terms what the metascript is, what the big conspiracy that the conspiracy theorists have missed, or they're paid to miss, or they've never considered it. And it's a big plot. I mean, I consider mass media to be the world state church. I think we have a new monotheism, but it involves God constructs, not the traditional notions of gods. And we're watching it. Just look at the last 30 days of how the public responded to the burning obelisk. I mean, which is one of the main symbols of the cult that runs the place. But the threat of a missile and how everybody shifted around it. And it's been very disruptive, in not so much in a bad way, but you can see how the sheeple in the different sheep pens can be activated. The big protest movements, the street violence, the chaos, it's just a matter of them essentially, it's almost like spell casting. Write the headline, provide the pictures, and the people will respond. It's just like that movie Mountainhead we were just talking about. But we've had a great illustration in the last month of the programmable, the programmed, and how they respond. Well, they react, rather. And I hear people talk about this, people I know who are just describing how their families their various relatives are worried about nukes and dying. And I'm like, at this point, if you're not a skeptic, you're going to be a victim of the propaganda war that's never ending. And by skeptic, all you have to do is decide not to believe it until you have enough information and to give yourself enough time to get that information. So let's say 3 days. 3 days is enough time for the AI, for the CGI, for the fakery to be deciphered. Let me just show you one example. There was an estimate on how many millions of videos and views were received by AI-generated content that people thought were actually scenes in Israel or scenes in Iran. And it's just like what we saw after 10/7. Or and you go back. They've done this before with every single major historic event. These things exist mostly in our minds. Okay, here we go. We're talking about AI-generated content. There was an article that just came out. And by the way, I don't know if this is real, but Kyle Rittenhouse looking like some J.D. Vance meme. Like, is this Kyle Rittenhouse, or did somebody fake this? Like, see, the skeptic in me says it's probably fake. But my cognitive bias says it's probably real. But this is, again, Kyle Rittenhouse, who I think is a total construct, who was, in many ways, groomed for his Kenosha thing. Before he went to Kenosha, he was at a Trump rally front row. It's just typical 17-year-old going to a Trump rally, going to the front row with a white hat on, and the next day he goes to save the day in Kenosha, while the QAnons are saying, oh, he's a white hat. He's come to stop the deep state. This manufactured hero drives across state lines to stop the looters. That's the same story as Chris Kyle. Kyle Rittenhouse, Chris Kyle. These are folk heroes. Ashy Dog says, my pops turned off the news because the Israel stuff sounded drunk, so probably worried. Well, it's predictable. And I honestly don't have enough information. Like, that's one of my points, too. When I'm saying something is fake, or I think it's fake, what I'm really saying is I don't have enough information based on what they've shown us to know that it's real. And so if you are saying it's real, I would ask you, well, what is your basis? If your basis for claiming it's real is I saw it on TV, then we don't exist in the same universe. You live in the Marvel universe. You live on planet Netflix. You're in the Disney universe. I don't. I observe it. I'm not in the Truman Show, but I can play along. Diana Southard says Kyle looks like he's 40. So does his what do you call Greta? Greta and Kyle, they have the same birth date, and they're each perfect representations of the worst aspects of the sides of the political horseshoe. Both born January 3rd. I don't know. I'm leaning towards AI because I'm looking at his picture on the book. It's called Acquitted. Okay, so he's been acquitted. It's not a particularly thick book. Now, I have to say, before he opened his mouth, before he stepped onto the world stage and tried to become Steven Crowder light, I was kind of like into the story. Like, I remember thinking this is actually not a bad thing. Like, how is this bad again? We're talking about unadulterated looting and rioting and people being beaten up, and the government doesn't care because it's peaceful protest. So we're living in 1984, and then this kid comes out into the mob, and he shoots some people who are doing bad things. Not that they deserve to be shot, but then you find out the people he shot deserve to be shot. So like, okay, so he's sort of a hero. He shot a pedo, he shot the strangler, he shot the communist burglar in the arm. What's his name? Grossarm, Gage Grosskreutz, who renamed himself as Paul Predator and got hit by an SUV while undercover. So, and then he went on TV to talk about what a victim he is and tried to go fund me off of it. It's like, you don't go undercover and then change your name and then go back on TV and explain how your cover got broken and somebody ran over you. Ashy Dog says, who am I to judge, but I feel sorry for him. I don't, because I think he's an actor. I don't think he's just some kid who got caught up in something that was over his head. I used to think so. I mean, there are some instances here where I'm wondering, though. Like, could someone like Kyle be real? It seems like it, but then you go through the different aspects of the story, and then you throw in the weird Greta Thunberg connection, and it's almost a case closed. But at times, it did seem that way. But you have to remember that they're building up a composite. He was like a youth cop. He was already involved with the police. So he had some connections there that might have put him in a place where he's taking part in an exercise. My question was, how do they pull it off? Like, it's easy to stage a riot for sure. The scale is the only real question. But then when they actually did the event, it looked very realistic, but it could have been a squib. Did you see Grossarm's bicep exploding? Well, that could have been a squib. And then you look at the bigger picture, how the event, how the character is integrated into mainstream politics. And the whole time the FBI had drones over the riots. They had drone cameras. They had total coverage. If you remember the scene, Kyle's hanging out with his gun, and the police walk up to him and they hand him a water bottle. And they say, we're going to send him down this way. I thought that was strange. They hand him a water bottle. And then the chaos ensues. And I kind of thought that could have been something of a cue. Because if you're performing a psyop, an open, in plain view of the public, more or less, it's mostly a closed set, but if you're performing one and things are being recorded, you're not going to want to say, okay, we're bringing the actors down. You're going to do the squib thing, run down the street. This guy's going to do this. They wouldn't say it explicitly, but they could kind of just more or less say it's a go, green light. Here's the water bottle means it's a green light. Because it just seemed so out of context at the time. Like, it seemed like the only interaction with him and law enforcement before the thing, and then after he shot the bad guys, the cops let him go, and then he went home. And you go back to Chris Kyle, who also crossed the state lines to stop looters, and he claims he climbed on top of the Mercedes Superdome, and he said he shot a bunch of looters. Well, that turned out to be fake, but look at the overlapping stories here. The right wing saw him as a hero, the left wing saw him as a victimizer. The crossing of state lines, the weapon was brought up, and the name Chris Kyle, manufactured hero. Kyle's also a Proud Boy. He got initiated into the Proud Boy group, which is also very questionable, run by feds. So everything about him says Fed. Now, this picture could be fake. It's besides the point. He looks very well fed. Oh, speaking of feds, somebody asked me who's going to be at the event in Atlanta. I have to check the list. I'll send out a link. But I'm no longer calling people shills or suggesting they might be. I think I've given everyone a pretty thorough examination. And I think a lot of people are genuine. I think a lot of people genuinely believe the things that they spout, even if they're unlikely or unbelievable. I'm not particularly satisfied with the video game Earth model, but I'm willing to talk about it. I'm willing to have the discussion about why we have a disagreement. And I think it's important to be able to disagree with people without coming to blows or name calling or just avoiding each other. Ghosting people you disagree with doesn't change the facts. And that's kind of where we're at right now. There are some people who are, we're reaching a singularity here. There's going to be a point where people who have spent a good portion of their lives promulgating certain narratives are going to have to reckon with the fact that these things no longer offer the explanations they once thought. And it shouldn't be hard. If you've already seen through the mass media paradigm and recognize that this is a subjective perspective that doesn't always overlap with the real thing, if you've already had that basic shift, you've recognized, okay, I was wrong about everything, then it shouldn't be hard to realize that, okay, I've been wrong about these other things as well. Especially when these other things that replace the first things you were programmed with were also put there to prevent you from arriving at the truth. Ashy Dog says he looks like he stress eats. I wonder who are forced to do these roles and who does it for fun. I don't know. I mean, there's some speculation, but there was one point where I thought he might have been legitimate. And that's when Lynn Wood, his attorney, told him to stay in jail because after the election, there would be some kind of apocalypse and he was safer there. And he convinced Kyle's mom to leave Kyle in custody, in-house, for another 30 days or something. And during that time, Lynn Wood had raised millions of dollars and he absconded with something like $4 million. So he could just be someone who's caught up in something, but I'm not quite sure. I don't think it works that way. And we debated this. We debated for months whether or not Kyle Rittenhouse really killed JoJo and shot the skateboarder guy in the chest and shot Grossarm. We really did debate this frame by frame, shot by shot, and it was not easy to just come to a conclusion. But eventually, over time, enough facts arrived to where we started to really question, well, it fits the pattern of a hoax, of a psyop. No element of it is unfakeable. And then you find out at the end that the FBI was recording the whole time, overseeing it. The FBI, what do you call that? There was some other, I call it the PSYOP entertainment complex, but essentially what I'm suggesting here is that if you have a PSYOP going on, there has to be somebody overlooking the whole thing. So they can pull the plug on it, or they can adjust if situations change to where it's going to be compromised. Because these are generally closed movie sets. I mean, think about the audacity of staging an event, a PSYOP, during a marathon, like the Boston Marathon. Well, if you look at that event, it happened at the tail end of it. When they do concerts, it's always near the end. Penguinotti says, was Kyle really in jail or was he in crisis actor pool hall detention? Good question. Good question. Same thing with QAnon Shaman. Did he go to jail? Or did he, that I think about, QAnon Shaman kind of looks like the Liver King. There's a similar archetype here. And why did the Liver King have beef with Joe Rogan? There seems to be some kind of competition here between these various caveman types. But wearing the animal skins, the bad tattoos, the steroids, whatever. I mean, Owen Schroyer didn't go to prison. Ashley Babbitt, not dead. Is P. Diddy even in prison, or is that thing a big hoax? Is he having, P. Diddy, Luigi Mangione, Sam Bankman-Fried? You've got the prophet of doom, Frank James, hanging out with R. Kelly. And who else is in that cell block? All kinds of popular people. I'm starting to think, no, I don't think Kyle spent a day in jail. G33 says the Kyle Rittenhouse scanner feed was one of the best, real or fake. Diana Southard says GAG, Government Actors Guild. Ashy Dog says, as normal public, it's hard to prove, but some things are obviously fake. Well, here's another point that has been raised here. You have to be able to explain why it's fake in a lot of ways, including especially the context. Like, you can't just say it looks fake. Someone said, oh, Trump's ear wound looked fake. Well, no, it didn't. I mean, maybe it looked fake to you, but that's a subjective opinion. When I saw it, when I look at it, I can't say unequivocally it, quote, looks fake. You know, he puts his hand up, he ducks. What about it looks fake? And that's a low information claim. So low information belief is, it's a headline, I believe it. Low information disbelief is the same thing. It looks fake. My gut tells me it's fake. Well, that's not enough. So how do I arrive at it being fake? Well, you look at the bigger presentation and all the rest of the content surrounding it, not just the concurrent and predictive programming, but also the suspicious activities of the media present, like the guy who photographed the bullet whizzing by Trump's head. There's some questions there. So even if something can't be proven visibly fake, you have to be able to call it out as fake, especially now in the age of deep fakery. I just saw this video with Chinese Drone Man. Chinese Drone Man is walking down the street and he has these drones on his ankles and his wrists. And he puts his arms out and his legs out, lays on his stomach, and then he flies up into the sky. And I thought, wow, I hope his batteries don't die. That looks kind of dangerous. And look, I look for fakery all the time. Well, it wasn't until I scrolled through the comments that I found out that it was fake, because a fifth drone rotor appears magically on the backside of his little configuration at the end of his flight. So I didn't know it was fake. That's my point. Ashy Dog says fake until proven real makes sense. Yes, fake until proven real. Unless it's a claim, well, I guess we should say fake until proven real. And by proven real, we mean the burden of proof. And for the most part, that's not hard to do. But if it's an extraordinary event, like a riot or a very public, I guess, like something that's like not a big deal, but it goes international, like Shiloh Hendricks. So Shiloh Hendricks, just some random person in the public, goes to a playground and uses racial slurs on a 5-year-old kid. And that went viral. And it happened to coincide with the viral GoFundMe campaign for Carmelo Anthony. And so I see these things happening at the same time, reaching critical attention and generating a response that seems to have been engineered. So what's more likely? That the news media is going to hype up this one particular person and platform all this, what they consider to be hate speech, or it was manufactured. So most of what we see is manufactured. And if you say fake until proven real, you're in the right. A few years ago, we had to kind of make the point that, oh, well, if it's an extraordinary claim, if there are hallmarks of fakery, if there's existing reasons to doubt it, like we had all these ifs, these criteria, which are still there, but things have changed to where now, if you're not skeptical, you're automatically a dupe. I mean, that's just the way it is, and it's getting worse. Fake until proven real was ahead of its time, and now I would say its time has come. 777 says Glow and Schroyer. You know, there was a good 6-month period where I was convinced that Owen Schroyer was the QAnon shaman, that this was some character he played. And I looked at all the different ways it could be done, and it seemed very plausible. I mean, just some bad tattoos, some face paint, like it's not that far. I still haven't seen the two of them in the same room at the same time. And I'm pretty sure the QAnon shaman has hosted InfoWars a few times. So it's not off the table 100%, but I'd say I'm 90% sure they're not the same person. N.A. Literalist says, lab scientists in Diddy's trial prove there's nothing weird about the baby oil, LOL. So scientifically proven not to be weird. Someone told me it was GHB, so it's not real baby oil. But why would you put GHB in a baby oil bottle? And there was a show that came out called Blink Twice. It was a movie with Channing Tatum. Blink Twice seems to be related to the whole Diddy freak-off parties, the white parties. Everybody's dressed in white, and they have this substance they call snake oil. And when somebody takes the snake oil, they have a period of forgetfulness, and they don't remember what happened at the freak-out party. So if you haven't seen that movie Blink Twice, it came out at the same time that P. Diddy was going to court. 91 Oki says, I called Owen a Zionist out loud. He looked frightened for 7 years. 7 years ago. I don't think that makes sense because InfoWars is on the side of woke right. In fact, Owen has been going to bat for Iran and suggesting that if anything happens, it's a false flag by Netanyahu. So he's taken the woke right, which is identical to the woke left stance on this thing. So no, he's definitely not on that side. And you wouldn't expect him to be. Because the red pill, which Owen Schroyer is a red pill dispenser, just like his boss, Alex Jones, the red pill ideology is actually a subset and a more mainstream friendly version of the J pill. Salty Siren said, I figured it was the chrome. Right, the chrome, the adrenochrome, the snake oil, the baby oil. See, the baby oil, also think about it, that's kind of ominous, but we're talking about, yeah, this gets pretty ominous. When you talk about the third eye, it being anointed, like, you know, the idea here is that the elite extract something from the pineal gland from babies. So baby oil is kind of like a sick joke. And why is that such a reoccurring theme? I was thinking about Skeksis today, you know, from the Dark Crystal. And the Skeksis were these big, hideous, bird-like creatures that would capture the little elf creatures and have this beam of light go into their forehead and then suck out their souls. Anyway, I was at the zoo, and I was hanging out by the bird exhibits, and they were basically going cage to cage. First, there was the bald eagle. They invited me up there. I gave a piece of salmon, a big chunk of salmon on a 3-foot-long tweezer to an eagle that they have in captivity there. It can fly, but its talons are damaged. But then I went next to the vulture exhibits, and there's this big, gigantic buzzard, and it was more or less being aggressive with the zoo person. Like they were trying to put water in the bowl, and they had to use it was like a dustpan on a handle to keep the vulture at bay. And it just kept creeping up on him, and it was trying to rip the dustpan out of their hands. Enormous wingspan. Like you can tell that thing's designed to rip flesh, just clean off bones. But it reminded me of a Skeksy, the way it was going after that person. Then there was another vulture, as smaller as a black vulture, 21 years old. Extremely active. I mean, I thought it was new. They told me that the vultures are bald because they have evolved baldness as a result of millions of years of sticking their heads into corpses and getting their heads really dirty. I don't know if that makes sense to me, but I think it's just interesting, the whole design of it. You got this bald-headed bird, and it has this perfect, like, white, poofy collar. Looks kind of like I mean, honestly, it looks like a costume. It's just unbelievable. And I'm not against the idea of evolution necessarily, but you know, when you say evolution, there's a lot of things that it entails, and a lot of these things are just remarkable to look at. And I don't think that young Earth creationism can firmly explain it all. All right, let's see what else here. Yes, you're right, Diana. Southheart says, didn't Donald J. Trump say if he was assassinated, Iran did it? He did say if something happens, go after Iran. You're right, he did call that out. And Iran did release a video of a drone going after him on a golf course. And then Ryan, kind of an anagram for Iran, was on the golf course. Ryan Routh. G33 says, yes, that's why they look like that. Yeah, well, let's see what else. Just kind of, again, just I randomly went to the zoo to check out the penguins, honestly. I have a pass, and I go there and I do these sketches. But if you go early in the morning, sometimes you catch them feeding these things. The cat exhibit has been closed for some time. Then I was out checking out some of the apes. The exhibits are pretty nice here, but you know, it's not the biggest zoo in the world, but our penguin exhibit is rather impressive because they have the surface where they all gather around their fake sun and their fake snow, and then they have the pool they swim in, and you go layers below and you can actually watch them swimming in profile or from below. Where are the animal fakers? Where are the people who say that penguins are fake, chimps are fake, koalas are fake, and pandas don't exist? The panda faking industrial complex. Do you know how many people would have to be involved in that? This is an important point because everything is fakeable today, but then you have to ask fakeable at what scale? So yes, you could fake gorillas with costumes, but only in a certain place from certain angles and perspectives for a certain amount of time. Then the costume comes off. So yes, gorillas are technically fakeable, but could you fake gorillas at large in all the zoos at the same time? No, obviously you could not, because you would need costume designers. Well, how many people would be involved in it? Like, it's one thing to argue that 400,000 people were involved in Apollo 11. It couldn't have been faked. And another to say that they're faking gorillas. Like, these are two different claims. And the thing with the NASA thing is compartmentalization. You could easily compartmentalize the end goal of the space program. But when it comes to the animal fakery claims, you're talking about different groups of essentially performance artists scattered throughout the world. I don't know. I think it would be too big of a... It wouldn't be impossible to centralize it so much. And space is a monopoly. So you only have so many people who have access to that launch pad. I mean, it's really a small, closed group of people who actually go to space. By the way, does Orlando Bloom know that space is fake? He just put in divorce papers for Kate Perry. I didn't know they were married. I don't care. I thought she was married to Russell Brand. Maybe that was in the past. I don't pay attention to, I don't care very often, but I saw that in the news today. And I mentioned Kate Perry because she went to fake space. And so that just raises the point that some celebrities are in the know about major psyops. And space fakery is one of the big ones. So what do you have to do to be let in on a secret on that scale? Constant Elevation says, heading to the Omaha Zoo on Tuesday, best zoo in the U.S. Well, let me know if you have panda bears or koalas. Ashy Dog says, TikTok's the worst content in my opinion, different internet culture. Yeah, I've tried TikTok and I have a few issues with it. One of the things is the delivery is based on clicks. It's too competitive for clicks and attention over content and quality. And I have a difficult time watching a video where somebody's doing the bug eyes with their finger wagging up above, pointing at the screen. It's like you're standing in front of the screen. And for some reason it became the standard where everybody is doing the wagging finger and they're doing the facial expressions. And their facial expressions are just appeals to emotion, raising an eyebrow. It's like, that doesn't mean you have a point. It's very annoying to have somebody staring at me while they think they're educating me. Like they're TikTok explaining it to me. It's like, no thanks. If I had an AI filter to filter out the TikTokers, I might have more use for it. But as far as where the best content goes, I mean, where do I go to search for information or research? I go to the IPS think tank. I go to the Discord server where we're drawing content, research materials from a lot of different people. And that's why we have to break away. The reason why TikTok sucks is because its users are brainwashed into a certain box. It's not going to suddenly become a hub for post Truman Show thought. It's never going to go outside of the box. Constant Elevation says they have a red panda. Well, the pandas are fake claim comes from, it goes way back. There was this guy named, actually, I think he's been doxxed. I think somebody gave me his dox and I saw him on Twitter. He went by the name Hans Wormhat, which is a pretty cool name, a good handle. Hans Wormhat became very delusional, and he was convinced that toucans were just parrots with beaks glued on, that duck-billed platypuses were fake, gorillas were people in costumes. He went down that route. He was convinced that his parents were lying to him about fundamental things, and they put him in a padded room when he started ranting online about his dad shaving his legs, suggesting his dad was his mom. So he kind of got twisted, but he started claiming that pandas were fake. And what his arguments came down to were incredulity and ignorance. So to say that a panda bear is fake is to make a claim in spite of contrary evidence. Well, what is that contrary evidence? They don't even go there. Their frame of reference are 5 or 6 curated YouTube videos. One of them is a guy in a panda suit, and 3 others are pandas looking kind of fake, which sometimes happens. There are some where it looks like, yeah, if you're questioning, yeah, you could conceive of how that could be faked. But they don't go into the biology textbooks. They don't go and study the skeletons. They don't go to the universities and ask, well, have any of you worked with this particular animal? What can you tell us about their diet, their digestive tract? I mean, there is voluminous information about panda bears inside and out that you don't have enough information from a couple of YouTube videos to declare them fake. That's what I would call a low information claim. And I make this distinction because we're not making low information claims. The same people calling school shootings fake are not the same people calling pandas fake or birds fake. We don't want those people mixing with us. It's like, okay, you stick to your fantasies. We'll focus on world stage Psy-war propaganda, because it's kind of frustrating that you're focusing on the objective analysis of propaganda and separating it so that you have subjective reality influenced by fake news and the real thing. So we're working on this, and the media's response is, oh, these people don't believe in panda bears. Harmon Walker says, I remember Wormhat and Mr. C used to say so many animals were fake. Well, the takeaway here is the quality of the claim and how it's made. So their claim is based on the appeal to ignorance and incredulity. Like a duck-billed platypus looks fake to me. Well, that's not an argument in favor of it being fake. But the appeal to ignorance is simply asking a question as though it's a question. And then the people who are ignorant will validate that and agree, oh, that is a strange thing. But the question's already been answered. So they're asking a question in spite of the available evidence. So it's a bad faith question when somebody raises a question that's not really a question, fishing for people who don't know the difference. That's how chemtrails spread. Chemtrails aren't spread by airplanes. They're spread by bad faith questions, appeals to ignorance, and loaded questions. But what I like to do is study how these erroneous conclusions are arrived at and then try to understand it so we can, fix it and see if there's anything we can take out of it. And one thing I took out of the fake animal phenomenon is simply fakeability. We have to acknowledge what is fakeable and then make our claims based on what we know to be possible to fake. So we know it's within the realm of possibility to fake any animal on a small scale, especially with AI and augmented virtual reality, sure. But can you make the claim that these things have been faked for 100 years and all the observations are fake and all that? No, that, if true, is a huge thing. And if the panda bear denialist was legitimate, they would go to the zoo and the university and the media, and they would expose a global conspiracy. Isn't that your job? If you're a YouTube conspiracy theorist and you want a bunch of clicks, you want a bunch of attention, so much so that you're going to say pandas are fake, why wouldn't you want to be the guy that exposes fake pandas? None of them want to take credit for it. Like, okay, if you're making an extreme claim that would make you the most famous person in that niche, and you're obviously doing it for attention, what's stopping you now? They never go far enough. And so Hans Wormhat and these others who make these extreme claims, they're not taking credit, which is another way of saying they're not taking accountability. So what's with these unaccountable claim makers? And I tend to think these are the agents. These are the operatives, that their job is to sow disinformation, misinformation. Because now anybody questioning the media can be lumped in with a larger body of people who fall for these scams. It's sad to say, but there are more people who don't believe in panda bears than recognize media fakery when they see it. And that's why, again, we're breaking away from Trutherville, because people like Hans Wormhat and his ilk live in Trutherville, mixed in with QAnon and the Alex Jonestown cult and all of the woke right J-Pill crowd. That's all one big group. And they stand in opposition to the mainstream, and they think that's far enough. Oh, we're not mainstream, so we're truthy. So Trutherville needs to, really be looked at as the alternative Truman Show. And you shouldn't be in there. So what we have done with this think tank is that we have separated our school of thought. We are a separate entity. I call it parallel media because we're not trying to butt heads with media. We're not anti. The anti position is controlled opposition. You got to be anti-anti, anti-pro. Our position is outside. It's a parallel course. We're keeping track. We're monitoring. But we're maintaining a steady stream of observations. I mean, we're just observing and reporting and noticing things. And we're not being swayed into accepting the premise of the consensus, because this is another problem, or this is how the thing works, is all of the past fake news is unchecked. And in the aggregate, it bends our history. It frames every subsequent news story. So if you're in the box, even if you're not paying attention to the news, whenever something big happens, you have the point of view that they're giving you. You are in there, you're put back in. Like, you can't escape the box by ignoring it. You literally have to be aware of it. Uninformed doesn't get you out, only informed. Ashy Dog says, weird international stuff with pandas, but obviously not fake. They have an interesting history, and I've looked at the claims for how they would be faked or why they were faked, but a lot of it doesn't stand up. And the truth of it is, they're very dangerous. You wouldn't want to hug one. I watched a video where a panda practically bit a guy's foot off. Like, they look playful and cuddly because cartoons, but that's not how they really are. But I think they had been targeted by hunters for a long time, driven into near extinction. They're definitely protected. But to call them fake off of weak evidence is what I'm pointing out. And I don't want, like, the birds are fake crowd to think of themselves as somehow connected to 9/11 was theater and nobody died. Like, these are just so different. And the people who arrive at these faulty claims are also using logical fallacies unwittingly to arrive at these claims. And our whole worldview is built with essentially people not paying attention, just being dog walked into their Truman shows. And then the people who see through it find themselves getting caught up with the alternative Truman Show. And Hans Wormhat is a perfect example of that. One of the big stories in the news right now, 33-year-old socialist, 33-year-old Muslim socialist wins New York City mayoral primary. And I see a lot of people mad about this. I think it was Laura Loomer. She's like, he's a socialist Muslim. As though she described him as a socialist Muslim and says that we want terrorism. And I'm like, okay, so what's the point being made here? Are socialists terrorists? Or are Muslims terrorists? Or is it socialist Muslims? Like which group? Are all socialists or only the Muslim ones? Or all Muslims or only the socialist ones? Like which is it? But I see a lot of 9/11 era propaganda narratives being brought back in New York. Again, I'm not really fazed by it. Just noted another notable 33-year-old. Beardson says, I'm playing Death Standing 2. There's a group called APAC that has abolished the presidency and taken control of America. I'm not kidding, LMAO. I'm glad that a lot of people out there playing video games are noticing the propaganda messaging in all of them. Okay, now Kyle Rittenhouse. That one picture is probably AI, but somebody sent this to me. They said, hey, do you think that Kyle Rittenhouse could also be this guy? Does anybody know who this guy is? Something Garcia, I believe. He was deported. I asked Grok. Grok said, based on the visual comparison, it's difficult to tell if it's the same person. Both have a similar facial structure, including the shape of the eyes, nose, mouth. But the expressions differ. But it could be the lighting. The second picture shows a person with a beard and mustache, not present in the first image. Clothing and setting. Anyway, it goes through. This is a breakdown by Grok. Is this the same person? Anybody here have any thoughts on this? Panda flu coming soon, says Tominoid. Pippi Langstruff says, who comes up with pandas? Unmitigated Mind says, isn't socialism a foregone conclusion at this point? Good question. I mean, what do we call it? I mean, I understand this dialectic, communism, capitalism, that in broad strokes they use these as, worldview builders and to get people on the same page, but you can't really say it's free market necessarily. But is there really a legitimate struggle between two competing political economic systems? And is any of this even valid, or is it all more theater when you get to the level of mind control that really supersedes all of this stuff? So like we're dealing with a system that has possibly artificial scarcity, constraints imposed upon it. We're being regulated over God constructs. Climate change, I view that as not just an eschatology, but quite literally it's a God construct. It's a punishing storm deity scenario that we've all acquiesced to. It's all just very questionable. So it's kind of hard to remain ideologically committed or pure because it's like, well, I'm going to vote for this guy because he believes that socialism is bad. Yeah, but he also believes that all these fake things are real and doesn't know the difference between real and fake because he's in the box. So do you want to follow somebody who's in the box and call them your leader? Whether they're duped or they're sworn to secrecy and they're part of the big deceptions, it doesn't make a difference. So at this point, I don't know. These are questions that are kind of outside of our purview. My objective here, though, is to continue to define the parallel media as distinct and to grow our think tank on that basis. We are bringing in many of the, I think, clearest thinkers. And we don't have certainty on all things, but we have clarity. And that's an important distinction. I've had a couple of people criticize in a way. They're saying, well, I'm kind of annoyed that you're so certain. How can you say? And it's like, it's not really about certainty. It's about clarity. I have reasons. I have a reasonable basis for the claims that I make. You, on the other hand, or the media believer, you're trusting what you saw on the screen. And you didn't know how manipulated it was. Now everybody knows because AI. But that's the big secret. Long before AI, long before generative art and video and fake news segments, they were already doing it with Hollywood special effects. It's been a standard operating procedure since the inception of media. Tomadoid says, got a 15-year-old stabs and kills a CEO at a house party here. Story coming up in the moment. Okay, good. Well, not good. I mean, it's another Luigi, another hero, another Robin Hood, and he helped society because he killed a CEO. The left's going to love him. Luigi plus that recent Netflix stab show. Well, plus he's 15, so we're not going to get a lot of clear information. Kind of like Anthony Carmelo, who stabbed Austin Metcalf. But this, is it going to be framed, as class warfare? That's what I'm interested in saying. If so, it's an alarming development. And if so, the left will see this guy as a hero. And so I know this stuff is fake. You know it's fake. But your friends and family don't. And I don't find it bothersome, but I know that there are people I know who think Luigi's a hero. And it's like, wow, you just sided with a murderer and a cowardly act of murder, fake as it is, just as a hypothetical. I mean, just entertain a hypothetical. Hey, if some guy kills a CEO, is that a good thing? If the person next to you says yes, there's something wrong with them. There's something pathological going on. And unfortunately, that's a lot of people, because that's wrong in all instances. And somehow that's been lost. I mean, Luigi as a hero. Or Daniel Penny killing Jordan Neely on the subway. Honestly, I find that also to be completely wrong, how the right wing made that guy into a hero. So they've played this class warfare card, and they've shown that both sides are willing to applaud the death of the other side. Unbelievable. 777 says, most isms tend to be fake constructs that have a built-in polarized fake opposition. That's pretty much their model. That is the model. And we have to look at this as systems. The mainstream mediation, like the worldview that we have, it's not about shape. We're not talking about geography here, but we're talking about how we process information and how that augments our internal worldview, our internal model. And what we have demonstrated consistently here is that our internal model is being deliberately influenced by a very, I would say, a centralized monopoly over worldview that transcends all nations, all media outlets, that, there's a monolithic source for it all. And it may look like it's decentralized, it's fragmented, and there's a lot of independent media. It's like it looks like that. But it only looks like that because they've internalized the parameters. So you might say, I'm an independent journalist. Big Brother's not telling me what to think. Well, I don't know. That if you can make that claim, just because somebody's not overtly telling you, because you may have internalized certain wrong explanations, certain constraints that will prevent you from arriving at the right conclusions. For example, if you think you can find the truth about a story by doing interviews and by researching stuff on the internet, but not including the stuff that's never reported, the stuff that's secret. For example, media fakery, psychological operations. If you're not including that, you're never going to have the complete story, not enough to arrive at the objective truth. And furthermore, no independent journalist operating on the world stage, getting regularly published, includes in their worldview media fakery and how far back it goes. So they haven't deconstructed anything. So if you're still in a post 9/11 world, if you're still in a world that had a pandemic, if you're still living in a world where you think space junk is real and nukes are real, you're not an independent mind. You're dependent. Your mind is actually dependent on the uh, worldview monopolist's version of things to give it context and place. We've seen this so many times. Recently, there was a security guard, not a security guard, somebody who worked in security who was a bodyguard for politicians or something, and he talked about protocol when it comes to assassination attempts. And he said that under no circumstances would a politician who's being shot at be allowed to stand up and parade themselves in front of the cameras, as Trump did. And he went further to say he didn't think it was real on the ear. But then he said, but that fireman did die, likely because the shooter was instructed to miss and accidentally hit him. And he said also that they must have chosen some undesirable so they could just kill him after. So here's somebody who sees through the Trump head wound thing, but then has to construct a story that makes sense of the other two people really dying. So that's in the box thinking. So he perceives something, but his entire worldview is still framed by their context, their perspective, which says these deaths are real. Now, if he was an auto hoaxer, if he wasn't part of the mainstream mediation, if he was a skeptic, he would already have been aware of the fakeability of such an event. And in which case, if any aspect of it is fake, it's all fake. You don't have crisis actors at events where people really die. There are no false flags. When we talk about these events, these are all essentially theatrical productions. It's the most accurate way to describe them. And if there's some elements of fakery, it's all fake. When they give you a body count, like, oh, there's a shooting, 33 people died. Okay, well, if there's evidence that supports it and you think it's all real and stuff, fine. But if there's any elements of fakery, like, oh, this exact scenario just happened on Netflix yesterday, and the person's manifesto is clearly written by the same person that wrote this manifesto, or perhaps there's a press conference and they're immediately making political changes, like there's a number of hallmarks to it being a hoax, which are things that we typically note right away. But if any aspect of it is seemingly fake, then your initial assumption can no longer be 33 deaths. If there's any hint of fakery, your assumption must be zero. Assume zero. Assume nothing. But assume a body count of zero. Like 9/11. Okay, some people are like, well, there's no planes. That was CGI. Okay, well, you're not just going to subtract the number of people in the planes from the death toll and still think a couple thousand died. No, if any aspect of it is fake, they all have to be demonstrated to be real now. The burden of proof has shifted, and they haven't provided any evidence to support a single one. And we had this debate back and forth, and it went from 3,000 to a couple thousand to some people still said, well, I don't believe anybody died on 9/11 except for the jumpers. And I had 9/11 jumper truthers, people who believe that nobody died, there were no planes, but they insisted that the jumpers were real. And that allowed us to kind of fine tune our approach here. Like, okay, what are his presuppositions here? What has this person not figured out? What assumptions are built into his assessment here that cause him to conclude that these ones must still be dead? And these are important discussions. That's why we have the think tank. It's not about agreeing. It's about arriving at the best answers. And in that case, again, it has to do with recognizing the scale of fakery that is possible. So a 9/11 scale event, well, how many people would be involved to pull off something like that? Well, let's just take a look at how many drills were being conducted that day. The NRO, there were 88 drills. There were 1,000 plus police cadets involved in mass casualty simulations. The drills that were being conducted all had to do with terror attacks on buildings and government buildings. So if you look at it, you're like, well, they had the personnel to fake it because they were doing drills. Or the London bombing, the London subway bombing. Do you remember that one? The BBC had a documentary about the London bombing. The London bombing happens just like the BBC documentary had this hypothetical situation. So I was like, wow, that's eerie, just like what we just saw on TV. And not only that, but during the bombings in the London subways, there were drills going on. 2 drills, 2 locations, identical to what really happened at the same time that they happened. So at this point, you have to be a fool to think that the BBC documentary and the real-time drills just happened to mirror a real terror attack. No, that gave away the game right there. You have concurrent media, whether it's entertainment, news, or documentaries, concurrent drills, and then you have an event that shifts politics. And this event isn't just any event. It's a historic event. It's a historically significant event that terrorists attacked London on this day. So these days get their wiki pages, and these become part of the aggregate, which we call history. So our history is being performed for us. It's being made. They make history on TV. They fake it into existence. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's the fact. And it's really the biggest conspiracy of all that is successful is the ongoing conspiracy to hijack our collective worldview and put us into a singular consensus Truman Show and then steer it any direction they want, controlling the present, controlling the past, and controlling the future. Ashy Dog says, an event planned forever with an unlimited budget. Yes, one more point here before I have to go. For decades, the conspiracy theorist people have always said that it's the military-industrial complex. So greed, government, corporations, greed, weapons of war, mass destruction, it's all going to lead to something because, of course, bad people are in control and they have a financial incentive to do war. So the military-industrial complex sounds like a real thing, a real influence, something we should be worried about. But it's just one of these buzzwords. I mean, it's not even a real tangible thing to define. But it sounds scary. Like, oh, they manufactured wars to do this because it's profitable. Yeah, it sounds scary. It's a cool story, but that's all it is. The truth of it is, the PSYOP entertainment complex has been in control this whole time. And the idea of a military-industrial complex, if anything, is a figment of the PSYOP entertainment complex version of things. It's like, essentially, it's a fiction, rather, they've created. So the PSYOP entertainment complex knows or operates on the premise that the threat of the thing is worse than the thing, and that works. I mean, look how many times they've pushed the goalpost back. The world's going to freeze by the year 2012. Florida is going to be underwater. Climate disaster. We're not going to survive 2012, 2020. They always push it back. In 2 more weeks, they're going to have the nuke. 2 more months, they're going to have the nuke. They always push it back because we seem to have a short attention span. But the point of it is, they don't ever have to deliver the real thing. And that should tell you something. If anything, it vindicates that the dominant influence here is the Psy war. And the people who think that there's a tangible war to be worried about are the most deceived and the most frightened. I used to be chastised by some who would say, things are going to go kinetic, and here you are, unworried and relaxed. I'm like, well, what should I be doing? Screeching? Should I be buying ammunition and storable food items and telling everybody that doomsday is tomorrow? Like, no, I'm not pushing doom and gloom because their whole system is built on the fear of the thing. So if you're pushing doom and gloom, you're actually doing their work for them. I often describe the red pillars as propaganda mules. All you're doing is you're carrying propaganda for Big Brother. That's all you're distributing alternative fear. Paradox Moronic says, whatever happened to the ozone layer? They used to talk about the hole in the ozone back in the 90s. Yeah, I remember they said that. Like, yeah, as Mazel says, in the 80s, your hairspray would make a hole in the ozone. I think that was all just early guilt tripping because what they wanted to do is associate certain things, cosmetics, selfish behavior, consumerism, becoming more competitive in a capitalist society. They associate these things with the destruction of Gaia, with the destruction of the world. That's why you look at these radical environmentalists and they have a certain aesthetic. I'd say they're ascetic. They see the worldliness of capitalism as the problem. And so their purity, their virtue is kind of worn on how plain they are. Not wearing the makeup, not doing the big hair, not being fashionable, but rather rejecting all these things. And that's part of this conflict of worldviews that they've set up here. Peguinati says, don't you think that if Islam are true believers and if they took over the West's controlled fakery, psyops would be gone and real beheadings and stonings and terror attacks would be back in power? It's a fascinating concept. Interesting. Because I kind of wonder about this. Did we transition from a darker, more violent world into the simulation? Not a literal simulation, but rather into a consensus hallucination in which we're safer like this. Like now we're just in a collective padded cell and we have these orderlies, but it's for our own good. Like this does sometimes seem like a benevolent dictatorship compared to what it would be. And I've seen a lot of videos. I've seen stonings and beheadings and hangings that I have no reason to dispute these things are real. And I keep in mind that, yeah, there are large segments of the human population that have no problem with that. Just like the lefties having no problem with Luigi shooting a CEO. Salty says, I saw someone in the news today says the ozone has healed with one of those heat-generated cartoon graphs. Maybe they patched it up with chemtrails, and this whole time chemtrails were there to stop the ozone layer. But they didn't want to worry the public that the hole in the ozone was going to keep on expanding until we'd lose our atmosphere and we were all going to die. But thankfully, Bill Gates had this idea to save us and Gaia. And they put this little additive in the planes. It's called chemtrails. And the chemtrails over time have formed sort of a patch, and they actually patched up the hole in the ozone. So thank a pilot. There's no nefarious conspiracy. They just couldn't tell you the truth because it was actually covering up something far more horrifying than geoengineering, which was that our entire atmosphere was going to be sucked up into space in like 5 seconds. Okay, here's the article I was looking for. AI and old videos fuel propaganda war on social media. This is exactly the plot of Mountainhead that came out last month, based on Elon Musk and X. As the conflict between Israel and Iran escalates, disinformation on social media is growing. In some cases, old videos are resurfacing from past conflicts. Some clips are even footage from video games. Others are generated by artificial intelligence. One video showed a burning skyline, which some claim to be an Israeli missile strike on Iran. Others claim to show Israel. I think InfoWars shared that one. Neither was correct. NBC News uses reverse image searches to find the original, and they found it was from 2003. Nothing new here. The main takeaway point, though, is that most people, the so-called auto-believers, they process it as real as they see it. And they don't go back and course correct. They've already had the emotional response. The damage has been done. Now, this is really strange, and well, it's nothing strange anymore. But how many of you have you seen this video? And I think Synchromorpheus had brought this up when the bombings were happening. There's that song, I Ran So Far Away, and they superimposed Donald Trump's, well, they superimposed Donald Trump into the video. But anyway, this AI fakery is so good. Sometimes I watch a lot of these things and I'm finding it increasingly difficult on first glance to determine what exactly about it is fake. And it's pointless to even try. Like, I know we could have a conversation like, 5 ways to tell you're looking at a deep fake, but at this point, it doesn't matter because it's just going to get better and we might as well plan for it. We're already reality compromised as it is. Misguided proposals to ban geoengineering lose steam. So for all those chemtrail believers who thought that because 34 states were considering bills to ban it, that they had won something, no. It turns out, even though there were some indicators it was going that way, nothing's happening. At the federal level, the U.S. EPA administrator took a brief break from lifting limits on toxic pollution to look at tiny amounts of sulfate released into the company's repurposed weather balloons. And basically what they came down to is that geoengineering is mostly hypothetical and it doesn't really exist. There's nothing really to ban. And they're only talking about it because chemtrail people think it already exists and they're already using it. But no, to be clear, geoengineering refers to global warming mitigation. So if you believe in global warming, maybe you have a cause for concern. Isn't it interesting how the belief that man is altering the weather is shared by woke left and red pill right? And red pill wokeism is a thing. Like, there's a mirroring here. And that's why I think it's very important to recognize Trutherville as being alternative Truman Show. Truth Hurt says RFK wants everyone to have wearables in 4 years. Yeah, a lot of people thought RFK was some kind of truther because he's an anti-vaxxer. Well, anti-vax is a controlled opposition position. I don't care about your opinion on needles, but that whole movement is controlled by the same people who created the pro-vax. They were talking about it in that event 201. In fact, it's a woke right position at this point. I don't really give it any airtime. RFK eats roadkill. He field dresses a bloated bear carcass and throws it on a bike trail and then talks about it later. He walks barefoot on airplanes. He takes his grandchildren on Father's Day to swim in sewage. And now we're worried about his opinion on wearables in 4 years. We're going to have injectables in 2 years. I mean, so I'm not even worried about that. Ashy Dog says we have Back to the Future President Biff. Some crazy stuff is incoming. Yeah, as far as the world stage goes, we had said there's going to be some major plot twist 6/11. And we were being not specifically calling that date, but we had been talking about significant developments foreshadowed in the entertainment that would be reflected in the future news that suggested escalations. And 6/11 was a date we were looking at as a major turning point. And since that second week of June, things have certainly escalated, and many, if not all of the elements, for the most part, that were being projected onto the world stage through Fantastic Four, Thunderbolts, and the other movies that we were talking about at the time have come into fruition. Specifically with the Iran-Israel thing, the talk, for the most part, about fallout and nukes. It's all escalated. So we have seen this escalation, the plot change. It was kind of slow for a minute. But it's not slowing down. It's just getting, I think, more interesting. Disgraced influencer Liver King arrested in Texas after calling out Joe Rogan in unhinged posts. Some people are taking the Liver King side. They're thinking that the Liver King is being essentially bullied by Joe Rogan, that Joe Rogan should have accepted the fight. Let me go through my notes and see if there's anything else. I've been keeping up with a lot of the schism on the right now, which is getting to be increasingly interesting. We'll follow up on this tomorrow. I made some some predictions, more or less, based on the madness for Laura Loomer, and things aren't looking good for her either. Let's continue to go through the comments. I had a few more I wanted to get to. Flat Bob says, Tim, do you have anything to say to this? This is psychotic. I want your side of the story, if you don't mind. Yeah, I'll bookmark it. Someone suggested I look at the book. Here it is. McSwap33 says, look at Invoking the Beyond by the Collins brothers. Their analysis lines up with yours in many ways. I did look that up a minute ago. Invoking the Beyond, the Kantian Rift, Mythologized Menaces, and the Quest for the New Man. This book came out in 2020. The Gnostic revival of the Enlightenment witnessed the erection of what could be called the Kantian Rift, a barrier between external reality and the mind of the percipient. Arbitrarily proclaimed by German philosopher Immanuel Kant, this barrier rendered the world as terra incognita, where the world out there was deemed imperceptible. Now here's where I think he's referencing how it gets into what we're talking about here. He says, the way was paved for a new set of modern mythmakers who could populate the world out there with their own surrogates for the divine. Collectively, these surrogates could be referred to as the beyond because they epistemologically and ontologically overwhelm humanity. I'll take a look. It's called Invoking the Beyond, and he's referencing here what is described in the description of the book as surrogates for the divine. And I'm often talking about God constructs, neo-eschatologies, and how we live in what I consider to be a religious paradigm, Nasatology, which has a lot of the iconography and symbolism of previous religious models, but has updated them through the lens of science fiction, where the space program has essentially replaced the previous heaven programs. Like, space is the new heaven. It's a new iteration of an old concept. 33-year-old says, how many Muslims have you met, Penguinati? I've met and worked with many, never met any extremists. I think Islamic extremism was probably a media fiction. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that the radical Islamic terrorist was a media fiction that was really hyped up in entertainment, and they introduced it on the world stage. And that got phased out. And as we got up to 2020, suddenly it was about the Chinese. So I remember hearing about the stealth jihad and how Islamists are infiltrating society. And then that got replaced with the Chinese are buying land. They're buying the farmland. They're taking over police departments. I'm like, wait, the same people like Steve Bannon, the same people who spent 15, 20 years ranting about radical Islam are now worried about the CCP, and they no longer care about Islam or ISIS. So it's like, okay, I think they changed costumes. I think that might be what happened. And I would say the same for the white nationalist thing. Like white nationalist, domestic violent extremist terrorists. How many of those have you met? How many? Like, I've met a few MAGAs, but I've never met an extremist other than the ones we see on TV. But the thing is, they create these figments in the public imagination. It's a hyperstition where, okay, it's created on the world stage through psyops. Everybody believes these things exist. So now all they need is one exemplar. Let's manifest one. Bring out one terrorist, let him get caught, show his manifesto. Now this thing exists and society can change. And we've seen it coming. So I don't have any reason to believe that Muslim extremists are any scarier than Christian extremists. I think these are both constructs. I've also correlated something here with the transition from the external threat to the internal threat, which is why we often talk about 9/11, 6/11, but how the radicals among the domestic violent extremists are being radicalized by QAnon, the whole Q movement, the deep state. So the deep state was a domestic version of the great Satan. The incels are the suicide bombers. The Quran verses have become QAnon verses. The MAGA ban, which is a thing, is where you saw a lot of Taliban values being brought into the far woke right, the MAGA ban. And I observe this going forward that, yeah, they have actually created identical constructs. And some have even referred to it as vanilla ISIS, white Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda means the base. The white nationalist extremist paramilitary group training across the country right now is called the base. Common origin. Fake. Violet Pangon says, did you see Trump strike on 216 start of Cancer, Trumpzilla, and the DHS warning from Cancer to the end of Virgo, 611 to 922? I didn't catch those dates, but that's a valid point. And we didn't really dig into this, but there's a strong connection between Cancer, the symbol, the sign, the solstice, the Titan submersible that went down last year, but also the beast of the sea, Jaws, having his 50th anniversary on July 4th. Godzilla. Godzilla was consciously designed to be a metaphor for the nuke. But again, Godzilla, we talked about, in fact, it was last year, it was his 69th birthday on 11/3. And we were talking about the significance of the 6-9 being the symbol of Cancer, the crab. Penguinati says there aren't extremers yet, but there are predominantly true believers who easily could be recruited to jihad once Islam has substantial might. Yeah, I think you do have a number of people in any group who could be prompted by the Psywar to attempt to take a more active role. How many loony lefties did you see attacking Cybertrucks? Like, that was a real phenomenon. And a lot of it was just keying the cars. I think the more elaborate ones where the Cybertrucks blew up, those are probably fake. Like, a lot of the stuff, these are self-inflicted wounds to generate sympathy. You know, for example, the attacks on the Cybertrucks, a lot of those could be faked in order to turn people against the opponents. I mean, that's typically how these psyops work. They're influence operations. But when it comes to extremist behavior, what they've made the point too is that, and the media has engineered these things. They've tried to engineer the threat or the idea that we're more threatened by the Second Amendment and Americans radicalized on Discord than external threats radicalized with some 7th century religious paradigm. And something else too. When they would catch a terrorist and they waterboard them, Guantanamo and all this stuff, what were they doing? They were trying to figure out where they were radicalized. It was always about contact tracing. Remember contact tracing? Where you try to figure out where the person caught the virus, so you're tracing it back. Well, they did the same thing with radicalism. Like, so this person shoots up a National Guard recruitment center in Tennessee, and 6 months before he was in Yemen at this mosque and he met this particular cleric. So they were trying to trace terrorism the way you would trace a virus. So we're looking at this idea that they can trace where the radicalization came from, and we accepted it as part of the war on terror. And that was why they had to take away privacy, the Patriot Act. We need to be able to see your phone records. They had to trace the source of the terror to the funders and the radicalizers. Well, what they have done is they've taken that mentality and they've applied it towards shooters now. So, well, this person did this bad thing. Where did he get the ideas from? Well, you have the guy that shot up the supermarket, the Tops supermarket in Buffalo. Well, that shooter went to Discord. So they were able to connect the dots. He went to this website. He got these ideas from Telegram, and that made him hate this group and believe that he was being suppressed or replaced. And so they blamed that Tucker Carlson sent the shooter. Like, that's the end result. Tucker sent the shooter. I forgot to bring this up. We were talking about the Riddler the other day. So the Riddler's weapon is a carpet tucker, like a carpentry tool that he kills the mayor with. And I remember at the time we were talking about the Riddler influencing the Prophet of Doom to shoot up the subway. And at the same time, we had this Buffalo shooter who was influenced by Tucker Carlson. And I remember I was comparing Tucker to the Riddler, and that he was being cited as the inspiration for the violence made sense, the Tucker being the weapon, or at least what Tucker was promulgating as a media demagogue. And as a comparison, Tucker to the Riddler, there are some connections that were being made there. But just kind of bringing it up, I don't think it was a coincidence that they chose that weapon. They emphasized it was a Tucker. But they're trying to suggest, again, so I'm not singling out Islam or domestic violent extremist Christian terrorists or Discord radicalists. I mean, Discord extremists or whatever, 4chaners, I don't, or Redditors. See, they also made the point in 2022, 2023 to give us a series of mass shooters that were influenced by left-wing politics, by Reddit. Audrey Hale in particular. And I remember thinking, this is a new development, of an interesting plot twist. I have been complaining that there were no female mass shooters. Like, where's the female mass shooters? We're all hit with the same propaganda. It should be a little more equitable. And it turns out that next month, they brought out Audrey Hale, and she shoots up that Christian school. Well, when that happened, suddenly the right wing cared. Right wingers did not care about mass school shootings because all the shooters were Nazis and MAGAs and gun proponents, and it was being used to advance anti-gun rhetoric, so they took the side of the shooter by default. But ever since these shooters were coming out radicalized on Reddit with an anti-Christian or anti-right-wing ideology, now they started to care. And it seems like most of the shooters since then have come from the other side of the political spectrum. Yet the bank, the guy at the bank, was it in Kentucky, who was shooting people in order to make a point about why we shouldn't own guns. I mean, these psyops are just getting, I'm sorry, but the writing's terrible, even if they improve the special effects. Okay, remaining comments. I think we've got them all caught up for now. We'll continue tomorrow. I just wanted to really get in here tonight and do a bit of troubleshooting. I want to make sure the phones worked, which they do. So thanks to the callers for helping me with that. And shout out to ChatGPT for walking me through optimizing our settings here at the IPS think tank. So we'll continue tomorrow. We'll start much earlier. I'll try to catch up on the archives here tonight. I know I've fallen a little bit behind. Violet says ISS soon. That's a valid question. I know it's got a leak. ISS has problems, and Elon Musk has been tasked with pulling it down, which I did more or less suggest was going to happen in Metascript Decoded in 2020. I said they're going to bring it down, but I thought it would be some kind of an accident with SpaceX and their Dragon capsule somehow causing some kind of disaster. Maybe they'd flip it over, but no. He's going to be paid to pull it down. All right, this is Chief Crow Auto Hoax. We'll continue tomorrow. Thanks for the comments.
I'm on Auto Hoax, and it feels so good. You just auto believe everything like I knew that you would. Dream, you know I ain't got time, baby, for another crisis actor with soulless eyes.
My buddy, my buddy and me.
Telecommunications Act of 1996.
96, y'all.
Gonna filter your eyes and scroll